Have you ever looked at something like a really beat up container or, something and thought, wow, that's kind of beautiful.
Yeah, like something's been through a lot, you know?
Yeah. Well, that's kind of what we're going to be looking at today in this deep dive with our sources.
Okay, cool.
So we have a YouTube video essay. It's called Renewal Amid Decay, a meditation on cycles.
Mm.
It's from Incomplete Works.
Okay.
And we also have a chapter from the book Zen and the Art of Enlightenment, Volume 1.
Right, so Zen stuff.
Yeah, lots of Zen stuff. And they both actually talk about this really cool pen and ink drawing.
Okay.
It's of a landscape, but it's like not a normal landscape. It's completely made of pots and containers and all these artificial structure.
Oh, wow, so it's like nature but not.
Right,
Yeah.
exactly. And what's really fascinating is that neither source mentions who the artist is.
Interesting.
Yeah, it adds this kind of mystery to it.
A little bit, yeah.
But both of them use this artwork to talk about some pretty heavy ideas, like decay and renewal and how they're actually connected.
Right. Because usually we think of those as opposites, right?
Totally. Like decay is an ending and renewal is a beginning.
Yeah.
But they're saying, like, what if it's not that simple? What if they're both part of the same process?
I mean, yeah, that makes sense when you think about it. Like in nature, things are constantly decaying and renewing. It's a cycle, you know?
Exactly. And the YouTube video specifically talks about how this connects to Zen philosophy. Have you ever heard of this concept of mu?
Yeah, I've heard of it. It's kind of hard to explain, though.
Yeah, I was reading about it and I was like, what is this? So is it like actual emptiness, like a vacuum cleaner or something?
Not really. It's more about the idea that things don't have like an inherent meaning. Like a chair is only a chair because we call it a chair, right?
Right.
But if we take away that label, that meaning that we've given it, it's just like, you know, a collection of wood and whatever. It's just stuff.
Okay, so it's like we're imposing meaning onto things.
Exactly. And when we get rid of those preconceived meanings, it opens up all these new possibilities for how we see things.
So like in the artwork, those pots and containers, those things that we might normally see as trash or junk, suddenly
They
become
become something new. They become vessels for life, you know, they hold potential.
literally and metaphorically.
Yeah,
Yeah, it really makes you think about what we consider valuable and what we consider disposable.
totally.
And speaking of finding meaning in unexpected places, the YouTube video also mentions this ancient Chinese text called the I Ching. Have you heard of that?
Yeah, the I Ching, yeah.
They specifically bring up hexagram 23. It's called splitting apart. Can you kind of explain what that means? Like, what is a hexagram?
So the I Ching is like this really old book. It's basically a divination text, and it's made up of all these different hexagrams, which are like these symbols.
Okay.
And each hexagram represents a different situation or a different phase of life or like a different challenge you might be facing.
Okay, that makes sense.
So splitting apart might sound bad, but it's really about this natural process of, you know, things falling apart so something new can emerge.
It's like that whole you have to break a few eggs to make an omelet kind of thing.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's not about just the decay itself, but about what comes after, the renewal.
Right. Like a tree loses its leaves in the fall, but that's necessary for new growth in the spring.
Right. And I think that's what's so cool about this artwork is that it visually represents that.
Yeah.
All those cracks and like rough textures and things that have been repurposed, they're not just signs of decay.
They're signs of change.
Yeah, exactly.
Transformation.
Yeah, transformation. And then the book takes a slightly different approach.
Okay.
They talk about how the artwork reflects this concept of non-duality, which is this idea from Zen
Yeah.
that things we see as opposites are actually like interconnected.
Okay.
They're not two separate things. They're part of the same thing.
Yeah. So like with decay and renewal, they're not actually opposites. They're just two parts of the same cycle.
Right. It's like that image they both talk about of fragile plants and robust weathered pots.
Yeah.
You know, it's like the plants are fragile, but they're growing out of these strong pots that have been through a lot.
Right. And the plants couldn't grow without the pots, and the pots would just be empty without the plants.
Right?
So they need each other.
Exactly. It's all connected. And it's interesting because both sources mention Zen gardens, but this artwork is not your typical Zen garden.
How so?
Well, instead of having that raked sand and those perfectly placed stones, you know, the minimalist aesthetic,
right.
it's just this jumble of pots and abstract forms.
Hmm.
It's like a Zen garden exploded.
Kinda, yeah.
So why do you think the artist chose to do that?
Well, I think it might be a way of like highlighting the artificiality of trying to control nature.
Right, because Zen gardens were all about like creating this perfect, ordered representation of nature.
Exactly. But nature isn't really like that, is it?
No, not at all. It's messy and unpredictable.
Yeah. So maybe by using these like found objects, these pots and containers, the artist is kind of poking fun at that idea.
And also making us question, like, what is art anyway?
Yeah.
Is it about creating something perfect and beautiful?
Or is it about finding beauty in the unexpected?
Yeah. And do you think that makes the artwork more impactful or less impactful? Knowing that intention.
Hmm. That's a good question.
I don't know, it's just making me think.
Me too.
And speaking of thinking, the book actually brings up some other artists who are kind of playing with similar ideas.
Oh, yeah. Like who?
Well, they mentioned Max Ernst
Okay.
and Giorgio de Chirico.
Oh, yeah.
Are you familiar with them?
Yeah, I know them.
Could you kind of give a quick explanation of their styles for people who might not know?
Sure. So Max Ernst was a surrealist.
Okay.
He was known for these really dreamlike images that kind of blended nature and the subconscious.
So like our mystery artists, kind of blurring the lines between reality and fantasy.
Exactly. And then you have Giorgio de Chirico, who is known for his metaphysical paintings.
Metaphysical paintings.
Yeah. They often featured these like empty cityscapes and mannequins and stuff like that. And they had this really eerie, unsettling feeling to them.
So both of them were playing with our perceptions of reality in a way.
Right. And they were both really interested in exploring the hidden meanings behind everyday objects and images.
Kind of like our mystery artist is doing with these pots and containers, right?
Totally. And the book specifically says that this artwork, by blending organic and man-made elements, is making us think about the relationship between humans and nature.
Like how we impact the environment and how the environment impacts us.
Exactly. And they have this quote that I think is really powerful. They say, "The artist continues the tradition of still life while simultaneously deconstructing it, questioning the role of art as mere representation versus a tool for deeper reflection."
That is powerful. So it's not just about depicting reality, it's about using those depictions to make us think,
Exactly.
to question our assumptions.
Yeah.
And I think that's what makes this artwork so interesting, is that it's not just a pretty picture. It's making us feel things and think about things and see the world in a new way.
Totally.
And it's all done with these really simple objects, these pots and containers.
Yeah, it's amazing how much meaning can be packed into something so seemingly mundane.
Right. Like who knew that pots and plants could be so philosophical?
Exactly. It just goes to show that you can find beauty and meaning anywhere if you're open to it.
Yeah.
It's all about perspective.
Well, I'm definitely seeing pots and plants in a new light now, that's for sure.
Me too.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about the artwork itself, but let's bring it back to our listeners. What do you think is the big takeaway from all of this?
Well, I think both sources are showing us that beauty and meaning can be found in the most unexpected places, even in things that we might normally discard or overlook, like a chipped pot or a cracked container.
Right.
They're also reminding us that decay and renewal are not opposites, but rather two parts of the same cycle.
A cycle that's happening all around us, all the time.
Exactly. And that we're a part of that cycle too.
So maybe instead of fearing decay or trying to avoid it, we can embrace it as a necessary part of life.
Right. And see the potential for renewal that it holds.
Yeah, and I think that's a really hopeful message, actually, because it means that even when things fall apart, there's always the possibility for something new and beautiful to emerge.
Yeah. Like from those broken pieces, something even stronger and more resilient can grow.
Exactly. And that's something we're thinking about.
Yeah, it is.
So I think that's a great place to wrap up part 1 of our deep dive. We'll be back soon to explore even more about this fascinating artwork and the ideas it's sparked.
Sounds good.
See you then.
See ya.
It's funny, we were talking about Zen gardens and how they try to create this perfect, ordered version of nature. But nature's not really like that. It's always finding a way to, like, break free from those constraints.
Right, yeah, exactly. It's like those weeds that pop up between the cracks in the sidewalk, or like even a wildflower meadow that kind of takes over an abandoned lot.
Totally. And I think that actually connects back to this idea of finding beauty in unexpected places. Because both sources talk about how this artwork, even though it's focused on decay and artificiality, it's still aesthetically pleasing.
Yeah, I mean, there's a definite harmony there. It's not just like a random jumble of stuff. It's been arranged in a way that's visually interesting.
Right. And it makes you realize that beauty doesn't have to be perfect.
No, not at all. In fact, sometimes the imperfections are what make something truly beautiful. Like, have you ever heard of kintsugi?
Yeah, that's the Japanese art of repairing broken pottery with gold.
Exactly. So instead of trying to hide the cracks, they actually highlight them.
And it ends up making the piece even more beautiful, I think, because it's telling a story.
Right. Yeah. It's like those cracks represent the object's history, its journey.
And it's kind of a metaphor for how we can approach our own, like, imperfections and challenges, right?
Totally. Like, we don't have to be perfect to be worthy or beautiful. It's those imperfections, those cracks that make us who we are.
And they make us stronger, too. Like, when you think
Yeah.
about what that pottery has been through
Yeah.
to be broken and then repaired, it's kind of inspiring.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, so both sources also talk about how this artwork, with its, like, mix of natural and artificial elements, it prompts us to think about our relationship with the natural world.
Yeah, like how are we impacting nature? And how is nature impacting us? It's a two-way street.
Right. It's easy to forget that sometimes, you know? We build these cities and we create these, like, perfectly manicured lawns. We try to control nature so much.
And yet nature always finds a way to, like, push back. It's resilient.
Totally. I mean, you see it all the time, like plants growing through cracks in the pavement or like a tree root that breaks up a sidewalk.
It's a good reminder that we're not really in control,
No, we're definitely not. And it makes me realize that we need to be more respectful of nature, more mindful of our impact.
Yeah, I think that's a big part of what the artist is trying to convey with this artwork. It's like a call to reconnect with nature, to appreciate its power and its beauty.
And to recognize that we're a part of nature, not separate from it.
Exactly. We're all connected.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I think this has been a really interesting discussion so far. We've covered a lot of ground, from Zen philosophy to art history to environmentalism.
It's all connected, right?
It really is. And I think it all comes back to this central idea of finding beauty and meaning in unexpected places. Like, who knew that a drawing of plants and pots could be so thought-provoking?
It's amazing what art can do, right?
It really is. And I think it's a reminder that we can find inspiration anywhere if we just open our eyes and our minds to it.
Totally.
So as we move on to the final part of our deep dive, I'm curious to hear what our listeners are thinking. What pots and containers are holding unexpected beauty and growth in your own life?
That's a great question. Where are you finding renewal amid decay? Let us know.
It's crazy how, like, a simple drawing of plants and pots can make you think about so much stuff.
I know, right? It's like, it's not even a complex piece. It's just pots and plants, but it opens up all these questions.
Yeah, and it just goes to show that inspiration can come from anywhere.
Totally. It's all about being open to it.
Right, like, you don't need some big, huge masterpiece to get you thinking about deep stuff.
No, not at all. Sometimes the simplest things can be the most profound.
It reminds me of that William Blake quote, to see a world in a grain of sand,
Oh, yeah, that's a good one.
and a heaven in a wildflower. Hold infinity in the palm of your hand, and eternity in an hour.
Yeah, exactly. It's about seeing the extraordinary in the ordinary. And I think that's what these sources have done so well. They've taken this, seemingly simple artwork and used it to explore these really complex philosophical ideas.
Yeah, and they've done it in a way that's, like, not intimidating,
Right. Like, it's not just a dry lecture on Zen Buddhism. It's a conversation that makes you want to, like, join in.
Totally. And that's what I love about these deep dives, is that we're not just, like, telling people what to think, We're encouraging them to think for themselves.
Exactly. It's about asking questions, not just giving answers.
Yeah, and I think that's what makes this topic so cool, is that it's so relatable.
Yeah.
Like, everyone has experienced decay and renewal in their own lives, right?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's part of the human experience, We're all constantly changing and growing.
So as we wrap up this exploration of renewal amid decay, what do you think is the biggest takeaway for our listeners?
Well, I think it goes back to what we were talking about earlier about finding beauty and meaning in unexpected places.
Yeah.
Like those cracks and rough edges that we might normally see as flaws, they're actually signs of transformation,
Right. And they can be beautiful in their own way.
Totally. And I think it's important to remember that decay is not the end. It's just a part of the cycle.
Yeah, it's an opportunity for something new to emerge.
Exactly. And that's a really hopeful message. So as you go about your day, look for those pots and containers in your own life.
Right.
Where are you seeing that unexpected beauty and growth? What are those cracks and rough edges that are actually signs of transformation? And remember that even in the midst of decay, there's always potential for renewal.
That's so true. Well, this has been a really great deep dive. Thanks for joining us.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been fun.
And to all our listeners out there, keep those minds curious, and we'll see you next time for another deep dive.